Hey all, in this video we are going to create these glowing sketches in Photoshop. So you might have seen this type of glowing sketches across the social media platforms. There are mainly two types in this. First is when a part of the subject is glowing like this, and second when the glow is from an external source like these. So let's do one example of each type. With this sketch open in Photoshop, we are creating the first type where the part of the subject is glowing. First of all, let's make it a dark so our glow effect is enhanced, and to do that, let's create a levels adjustment layer, clip to the eagle sketch layer, and move the sliders towards the dark part as per your preference. We can change it later if needed. Now for the glow effect, let's make a new solid color and choose a color for your glow. For this, I am choosing green color and press OK. And with layer mask selected, press Ctrl or Command plus I to invert it. And make sure the foreground color is white. Now determine the part on which you want your glow to be. For this eagle sketch, I think it would be its eyes and beak. So with hard round brush selected and opacity set to 100, flow less than 10 and smoothing to 0, let's start drawing over its eye. Now double click on this layer, go to the blending options and move the underlying slider towards gray, which brings back the black lines. If it is fading your paint so much, press Alt N and make a range of colors to fix it. Now this brings back the black lines, which makes this look like we are painting below the lines. Now let's complete painting over the parts we want to glow. Now that we have painted and determined the glowing areas, let's add an exposure adjustment layer and clip that to the solid color layer. And now let's increase the exposure levels and then invert the mask. And paint in the middle of the glowing areas. This is to make the middle part of the glowing areas more brighter. Now make another solid color layer with the same color as the previous one, and I think this green looks better than the previous one. So let's copy its hex code. Now select the layer mask and press Ctrl or Command plus I to invert it, same as this green by pasting the hex code there. And as you see, now we have this yellowish tone in center, which according to me looks more bright than the previous bluish tone. Now let's make the blend mode of this new color fill layer to linear dodge add. Now choose the soft round brush, set the size as same as the glowing part, make sure your layer mask is selected and foreground color is set to white, and now keep clicking in the center of the glowing areas and increase the brush size after every click, which makes this a lens glow type effect. Now duplicate that solid color layer of lens glow, delete the layer mask and create another layer mask, invert it and make sure its blend mode is linear dodge add. And with this we will create some local glow or highlights near the glowing parts. Now paint a little and go to the blending options, split the slider as previous by clicking on the Alt or Option key to make sure we see the black lines properly. Let's remove this paint and let's start making the highlights. Make sure the flow is very low to make it very soft and subtle. And now, as per your image, you have to figure out where the light from the glow would reach. Now let's add another exposure adjustment layer above the highlights layer. Clip it to the highlights layer. Increase the exposure level as per your preference. And now with the layer mask of exposure layer active, press Ctrl or Command plus I to invert it. Now paint it around the highlights which are near the glowing parts to make them glow more. Now add another exposure adjustment layer at the top of all. Increase its exposure levels a little and then double click on the layer to open blending options and move the underlying slider towards the white to enhance the brightest areas. Now let's add finishing touches with the camera raw filter. Press Ctrl Alt Shift plus E or Command Option Shift plus E to create the merge copy, and let's change its name to camera raw filter. Convert it to smart object and then go to filter and click on camera raw filter. Now you can play with the settings to get the best possible results, and after it's done. This is before and this is after. Now with the second sketch open that I took it from Pinterest, and this is not sponsored by Pinterest, so if you're watching this Pinterest team, you can sponsor the next video. And it is made by an artist known as Angel Ganev, again not a collaborator or a sponsor. Let's create it in the second type where the glow is from the external source. So let's make it a little dark again like we did in the previous one with the levels adjustment layer, and this time let's select pink color and change its blend mode to linear dodge add and invert the mask with Ctrl or Command plus I, and let's start painting. According to your image, you need to decide where and which external source the light is coming from and then paint accordingly. Here I am using soft round brush with opacity 100, flow less than 10 and smoothing 0. For this sketch I am assuming the light is coming from left side towards her face. Also let's go to the blending options and move the underlying slider to paint below the lines as we did earlier. So if your sketch has some object which is glowing, so then you need to make the glow on that like we did it in the first, and then make highlights on the main subject. But if you are imagining that the light is coming from an external source which is not visible like in this sketch, so you need to create the highlights only on the subject. So in this it's more light than glow, which are both different things. So now let's complete painting the highlights. So after completing the highlights, just like before, add exposure adjustment layer, clip it and increase the exposure levels and invert the layer mask and paint on the brightest areas that you think on which the light will fall first. If you want, you can also change the color later to see which one looks best. I think this blue one looks much better than the pink one. So let's change it to blue and let's adjust a bit to see we get the glowing parts right. We can add another exposure adjustment layer and no need to clip it. Increase the exposure levels and remove it from the shadows using the blending options to enhance the bright areas. Now invert its layer mask And with white foreground color selected, paint on the bright areas to make it more glowy and bright. Now, as we have done in the first sketch to the highlights, duplicate the layer. Now put it above both the exposure layer. Make sure your exposure layer's clipping mask, which might get removed, gets fixed. Delete the mask and add a new mask and invert it. Now click and increase the brush size on the parts where you want the lens glow. Now let's finish this with camera raw filter and done. This is before and this is after. I know you have enjoyed this, so don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and share your edits with me by following my socials. Links are in the description. Until next time, keep watching Haynes Graphics.